Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Practical Psychic Podcast. I am very excited about today's episode because we are just going to geek out about the Agatha All Along series. And today with me, I have a special guest. I have Sarah. She's the Metaphysical Witch, and we are just going to get into this. We are going to talk about this as fellow practitioners. I'm a psychic medium. If you are new to me, she's a witch. I'll let her kind of introduce herself in a second. But we are in this community. We're doing these things every day, all day. And if you're familiar, Marvel kind of released a new series called Agatha All Along. And it's very witchy, it's very woo-woo. And I wanted to just pick somebody's brain about this and learn, like, if these things were accurate that we were seeing in the show, if they weren't, and I wanted to just, like, debunk this, pick it apart, see, you know, how much truth there was to it, or maybe if there were, like, stereotypes, myths, and I just thought it would be a really fun conversation. So I reached out to Sarah. Sarah said yes, and I'm so excited. Thank you for being here. And I want to just, you know, I'm going to pass it over to you next, and why don't you just kind of, like, explain to everybody your background, how you became a witch, any of that you feel is relevant to sharing.
Okay, yeah, hi everyone. Thank you for having me, Lauren. I'm Sarah, I'm the Metaphysical Witch, and I have been practicing witchcraft since 2018, so a little over 7 years, I believe. Yeah, and I also read tarot, and I am also an aura reader, and I own a little small online witchy shop, a little metaphysical shop. And yeah, like every day for me, I have my little rituals. I'm very spiritual. I think in 2018, I sort of was just like, I want to know more. I am a Gemini moon, so I love learning everything. And so I just, it's always kind of interested me. I've always kind of been drawn to like more occult things and like kind of like the weird things, mysticism, spirituality, and then I just started studying and I went with that, so that's how we're here now.
Love it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, and where can people find you? Obviously I'm going to link all of her stuff down below, but how can people find you?
I am on Instagram at the Metaphysical Witch. I'm also on YouTube at the Metaphysical Witch, and my TikTok is Metaphysical Witch. So it's without the but yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
I'm pretty active on TikTok, and Instagram.
Nice. Yeah. I think that's where I found you. What services do you offer? Like, do you do readings, any of that, just for people?
I do readings. I do tarot readings. And I do aura readings. I call them like clairvoyant aura readings. So basically what I will do is I'll have someone email me or send me a picture of themselves, or I have in-person clients as well. And we'll kind of just connect for a little bit, and I will sketch the colors of their aura, and then I will interpret them for them and give them just, you know, anything that I pick up and the meanings behind it. And that's really fun. My clients really like that.
I love that. That's so cool.
Yeah.
I might have to reach out to you for that. Well,
yeah,
awesome.
A lot of people do, they offer like aura photography where you can go, which I've had done before at a psychic fair, and you can just go and put like I think you put your hand on this like little monitor type thing, and then you like stand in front of the camera and it takes it for you, and it's really cool. And then they basically like print out like a report for you. And I've done that before, but I feel like mine's more, like connecting, like more intuition based. So yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's cool. I feel like, I mean, not to get into it, but I feel like as a filmmaker, I'm a little bit more skeptical of the cameras.
Right.
So I think that's a more intuitive way of doing it. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, that being said, I forgot to mention a little bit about myself. I am a psychic. I'm a medium. I am also like filmmaker first, so that's kind of how I got turned on to the Marvel series. I've actually been watching them since about whenever they started back in like 2008. That's one thing I didn't ask you is, have you been like a Marvel fan, or did you just jump into Agatha?
So I am not the biggest Marvel fan, and also I had no idea you were a filmmaker. That's really awesome. I love that. That's really cool. So I'm not the biggest Marvel buff. But I did watch WandaVision, and I loved it. I thought it was great. And then when I noticed they were going to do Agatha and you told me about it, I was like, I'm going to watch this. It's going to be awesome. And I loved it. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I think, and I will say for everyone that's listening, this is not like a Marvel breakdown. I'm sure there's like 800 podcast videos out there about like, the Marvel side of this. We're just going to really talk about like the psychic, witchy aspect of both of this, again, coming from our background. So that being said, like, spoiler warning, we are probably going to talk about it. So if you need to save this and come back, feel free. We're probably not going to like super go into the plot, but I think it's helpful maybe to watch WandaVision for context, but I do think you could technically get into Agatha and watch, you know, some of the like breakdowns maybe. I mean, how do you feel about that?
I would agree with that because there are like some things from WandaVision, but I feel like if you were just to, you know, just do only Agatha, I think you would be okay. I think it would be all right. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. Well, and for those of us, or for those of you who are leaving, maybe saving this, coming back to it for later, I was gonna ask, like, why should they watch it? Like, why do we recommend that they actually go watch it? Without my opinion of like why you should check it out if you haven't watched it yet is I think overall it's one of the more accurate representations of like what we do as both psychics. And, you know, not speaking for you, but it's one of the more accurate things that I've seen out there, and I have seen a lot of shows, and I could probably only count like 5 or 6 that are like close.
Right. I really liked that it was, I wasn't expecting it to be so like modern witchy, and I really appreciate when there's any kind of like media, popular mainstream media that represents us, even if it's a little dramatized, I still appreciate it a lot. And I think it's fun. And I like that other people can watch it as well and kind of engage with that. And that's fun. I like that.
Yeah. Brief summation of Agatha All Along, even if you're not interested in watching, but you just want to like listen. Agatha's a witch. She previously lived in Salem. She kind of betrayed her coven. In WandaVision, she was kind of put under a spell, and she's kind of coming out of that spell. And her mission is to kind of go down the witch's road, which was instigated by Teen. His name is Teen. And so the whole story is about she's going down the road. Everyone's got their own kind of motives of why they need to do that. But she needs a coven to do that. So she's gathering a coven of witches, and they go down the witch's road together. And so that's kind of the preface here. And now I just want to jump into the questions here that we have for each other. And the first one for you I have is just, why do you think this was just so well received by everybody? Or was it well received, I guess I should say?
It was fun. There were, I think like they really did a good job at keeping you like on edge and wondering what's coming next, especially with Teen. And also Agatha, and we're like, okay, we're going to see them walk the road. What's going to happen? So I think they did a really good job with that, but also with all the witchy stuff is so interesting. And I think people really are drawn to that, even like just out of curiosity. So I really like that. It was fun. It was fun for me and my husband. We watched it together, and he really liked it too. So
yeah, that's cool. I feel like a lot of people that I saw online that I follow that are witches, because you in this realm, a lot of us interact with each other, and I would say I don't want to call myself a baby witch, but I'm learning, not even close to some people, but I follow a lot of people, and everything I saw online was just like, oh my gosh, this episode, that episode, and so what's a coven for those that are listening that might not know what that is?
So a coven is basically a group of witchcraft practitioners who come together and they support each other and they practice with each other. Think of it similar to like a parish at a church, where you all gather together and you all believe in the same thing and you are sort of like a quote unquote family. However, a coven would be much more smaller and intimate. So yeah, and not all witches join a coven. It's really up to your own individual preference if you want to practice with others and if you want to connect with others, or if you would much rather, practice solitary. So,
gotcha. Yeah, That's cool. It seems
Yeah.
like it's tough to kind of find one, at least, I don't know, from my perspective.
It is. So I'm in this witch group on Facebook, and there's always witches looking for, a coven or like a meetup, which I think is great. But with anything, you sort of have to find the witches that are similar in your beliefs and your practices and all that, because people are so different, especially witches. They all practice differently and they believe in different things. So it can sometimes be hard to find others that are similar to yourself.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think when I was learning psychic development, I was in a course, and there's a bunch of other girls there, and we would get together outside of the courses and practice, and it felt, I was like, you know what, I think that's kind of like a coven.
It's
we were
basically
unofficial. Basically,
like
that's what we
a
were
psychic coven.
A psychic coven. Exactly.
Yeah. That's awesome, because I feel like you could just, be with people who understand you, and then at the same time you just build each other up and you can practice and get better. I think that's nice. That'd be nice.
I think one of my favorite lines from the show, Agatha's in the car talking to Teen, and she says something like, in any 3-mile radius, there will be people witchy enough to form a coven. And it kind of just feels like she's slapping these people together. And I think they ultimately have 5 people in their coven. Yeah. And I didn't know if there was any significance to that, if that's normal, if you have any insights on that.
So what I pulled from that is I do believe you could probably find, witches very close to you. You would be surprised, actually. We're just not very, open about it as one would think. However, the part where they're looking for different witches, like a green witch, divination witch, was interesting to me, because when you're doing witchcraft and you want to cast a circle, usually you would cast a circle with those elements, and each element represents a different direction or a different color. So north would be earth, and that would be represented by a green witch, and east would be air, which would be divination, and then south would be fire, which I think was Lorna. So south would be fire, and then west would be water, so the intuition. Although I think water, I wonder who water would be. Maybe Jennifer, or maybe they could I
think it was supposed to be Jen. Because she was potions, and I think they were trying to potions, water.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then spirit would just be represented by you, the practitioner. So I kind of thought that was interesting, they're getting different ones, but that's basically the 5 points of the star. Or if you're casting a circle, well, if that's what you do in your practice, because some people don't like to cast circles, but they usually do. Yeah, it's just those elements.
I see. And for those who aren't familiar, what's casting a circle mean or look like?
So when you are practicing and you're going to do a ritual or any kind of spell work, usually you can cast a circle, which is basically setting up a energetic circle that is, high vibe, and where you can feel more energy within that spiritual circle. So it's not a literal circle, it's just an energetic circle that the practitioner will cast, and that is where you will do your working. So it's supposed to enclose and kind of help you amplify your working or your ritual. So yeah.
That's funny. I think, it's funny. No, that's not funny.
It's interesting.
It's interesting.
It's so interesting, yeah.
And it's interesting because when I was learning psychic stuff, I was over here doing a class on tarot, or over here doing a class on shamanic rituals, and it's funny because I would still get some of that in the teaching, and I've now found out that the teachers were actually witchy.
There's a lot of it when it comes, when I learned there's psychic stuff and witchy stuff, there's a lot of it that sort of intertwines with each other. So it's very similar.
Very.
And I know some witches do, a lot of witches do psychic work, but not all of them. So.
Yeah. And I think that makes a good point that I wanted to make as well, is that, a lot of people assume that if you're psychic, you're a witch, or if you're a witch, you're a psychic. And
right.
A lot of people are both, but it's not always true. And it's
not always true, yeah.
Yeah.
I just feel like when you're, like for me, when I first started practicing, I wanted to get good at meditating. So I started practicing meditation and I started to, you just kind of start to be more open. So if you do have, any, if you are sensitive or whatever, that kind of start to make itself known to you. And so you're kind of like, oh, what's happening? Well, I think it's because like you start to be more open
Yeah.
when you're practicing witchcraft, and you might be more aware of psychic things that might have been happening before that you sort of like blocked out or anything like that. So I just think like the witch just makes himself a little bit more open to any like psychic things or any like spiritual happenings. So I think it's pretty common, especially if you're a witch who likes to meditate.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of inevitable. You end up dipping your toes in that.
Yeah, and I think it goes like both ways too, and like probably for you, like I'm sure you're drawn to witchy stuff too, because it's kind of like, they're like the same realm, sort of,
Yeah,
so
they really are. And I think over the years I've sort of learned how much I was already doing that was in that realm.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, that's
I'm already doing this.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Okay, so Lilia was the Divination witch, and she had a storefront. Now, you as a psychic, would you ever like own a storefront? Do they still do that? Have you been to one? How do you feel about them?
Yeah. And one thing I forgot to mention is we're both in Colorado. And I have seen one little spot near me in Denver.
Really?
One little house. It's been here since I've lived here. And she still has a storefront up and it's always open and people are welcome to come in. I think those days, are kind of over. I could be wrong here, but it seems like a lot of the older practitioners, that's the way they would do it.
Right.
That
makes a lot of sense, though, because I feel like now for, like, us, it's easier to do more, like, online and connect that way. But I do kind of feel for them because I feel like you would almost have to like put yourself out there and have a storefront and then, network in a different way.
Exactly.
Not as modern.
Yeah. I think it's accurate to her character in the older age of psychics, but
that's
now
so true.
Most of us are probably marketing online. I would say there's a chunk of people who like go to metaphysical stores and they will read and be there all day. And I tried to do that, I think twice with different stores, and I think I sat there for the majority of the day and didn't get any readings, and I was like, this is a waste of my time.
Were you just doing like a guest reader? Did you go in and ask, like, hey, can I be a reader?
I think I did a guest reader one time, so they knew I was coming, and it was advertised, but I still didn't get more than like 2 or 3 people, and then I tried another one where it was just walk in, like, you got to be here all day, and you make money if people come in and sit down. And I think I made it one day, and I was like, this doesn't make financial sense.
Wasn't for you. Yeah. That's happened to me, too, actually.
Okay.
I've experienced the same thing. I think, like, sometimes I'll do events. There's a theater here in my town, and I went once, and I told them, look, if you want me to show up, at least give me, like, $50 or something, because if nobody shows up, I don't make any money, and that's my livelihood. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's your time and energy that you could have been doing something else,
Yeah, and I also don't think a lot of people realize, or at least for me, I don't know about you, but it's a lot of energy to give readings in a different space that's not like your own.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It takes more time to get centered, grounded.
And there's like,
Yeah, there's definitely more to it.
Yeah. So true. Let's see. What is the next one? Have you been to Ritual Craft, by the way?
Yes. It's my favorite store.
That store's so cool. I love it. Yeah. It's so fun. I think they have readers too.
They do. I think they've almost always got one. Once upon a time, they also used to have like the aura photographers there, like 24/7 as well. I was impressed that they could keep them there all day.
Right, me too. How do you feel about people assuming you have to pay more money to a psychic to get more information. How do you feel about that?
Yes, I think it's definitely like a trope that's out there,
Yeah.
and I've done some videos in the past of like me reacting to psychics in certain shows and stuff, and it's such a thing. It's like, oh, you got to pay more money to get more information, and
Right.
I like honestly, I'm kind of tired of it because I feel like most ethical readers are not that way, and if you come across anybody that's like that, it's like big red flag. Don't go there.
Right.
But and a lot of what I teach is like, hey, no, you know, you don't tell people they need to come back to you. Like as a psychic, you do the reading, you let it go. You don't get to control what they do with that information at the end of the day. So
Totally agree. Do you think there are, you know, psychic like scammers out there? How do you feel about that?
I will say there are people that do this. There are people, and I've seen them, and it sucks because those bad eggs, you know, get seen and represent us.
Do you think are they actually like gifted in any way, or are they just doing it for the money, you think?
I think there's both. I think there's people who are literally trying to read, try to offer those readings, but that don't have the ethic, you know, like thought process of like, maybe I shouldn't do this. And then I think there's legitimate scammers that, you know, send you Instagram messages like, I sense your energy, your aura is so
There's
beautiful.
Totally witches like that too. Like fake online witches who do that stuff too.
Yeah.
And it's just like, just stop. It's so annoying. It's sad because some people will like, you know, if you don't know any better, you'll be like, oh my gosh, I need to, you know, give him money because he's going to curse my whole bloodline or something silly, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've definitely had people message me before, like, did you just message me offering me a reading? I was like, nope. Nope.
That's totally happened to me too on TikTok, and I have to be like, this is a fake account, don't listen to Oh, that's so annoying. I can't stand those people. Do psychics use a crystal ball? Do you use a crystal ball?
The closest thing I've got is my little moon back here. But it's just
my gosh, someone gave me that crystal ball for my birthday.
Yeah.
But I don't really scry or anything. Like that's not my strong suit. So I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, like I learned when I was learning to be psychic, it was offered as an option. They didn't bring in crystal balls because honestly, crystal balls are expensive. Like they're expensive. Even those little ones cost me like $60. But point being, like, it was a thing. It is a thing. People intentionally look into the ball to try to intuit things, whether they're literally seeing something in the ball or just like using it to like hold their focus so they can sort of get it maybe through their other clairs. I don't use a crystal ball. I tried it in the courses that I took, and it was just too distracting. It was better for me to kind of just like use my mind's eye, my clairvoyance instead. So,
that's so interesting how people use them. And then I know like people will use like water or like a black mirror or like, you know, I think sometimes they do fire, like a candle flame.
Yeah. You can scry with all sorts of different things.
I know, that's so interesting. I think that's interesting. I'm not good at scrying.
No. Yeah.
No.
It's never really worked for me. But that doesn't mean it won't work for other people. So that's why I'm always like, try it. You never know.
Yeah, totally. Because people have different, like, you know, strengths when it comes to that stuff. So, a Ouija board. How do you feel about a Ouija board? And have you used one? How do you feel about the rules?
Yeah, the Ouija board, and I got my necklace today on my Ouija board.
I noticed that. I like it. I think I have a planchette like somewhere over here.
Gotcha. But I mean, I think Ouija boards, like overall, I will always say that they can work, but they're limiting. They're slow. And I did a whole video where me and a friend like literally tried to like use it, and it was slow and it didn't work. And you're basically getting one letter at a time. And I'm always like, if I'm connecting to my mediumship abilities and using that, it's so much faster. And I also think Ouija boards don't work like solo, but they can work, especially in like big group settings. I think more people, the better. But specifically for Agatha for this show, like, I don't know. Like I could say, like, I don't have any complaints. Like it could work. Yeah.
I mean, it's like a form of divination, but I know people there's always like controversy around the Ouija board. But I know they like to use it in movies, and they love the Ouija board.
Yes. I went to the Ouija board museum in Salem, and the guy that was there, like, talked about it, and
Yeah,
he loves it so much, and I do think people... The only thing is there's a lot of fear around it, and I really treat it
there
just like...
totally is.
It's a tool. Like, I don't think...
Yeah.
You know, I've got tarot cards right here. I don't think
Yeah.
something could possess these and live in it,
Right.
but something about the Ouija board, a lot of people
There
believe that.
totally is, and I wonder, it's got to be like media influenced, probably,
yeah.
maybe.
I think there's like several movies about Ouija boards, I feel.
Yeah. There totally is, and
Yeah.
I always find it kind of funny when there's always a Ouija board.
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh, like Agatha, they used a Ouija board, and I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
I was like, that's awesome.
It was definitely cool. I liked their version of it. It was really like old, and it looked like it came from like the 80s or...
Yeah, I noticed that.
I was like, where'd you find that?
Yeah, it was really cool. And Agatha, she cracks me up. She's so funny. she's my favorite because she's just so funny. Like I like her. She's unhinged a little bit.
There's so many lines in it that it totally got me. I was telling you when I was messaging you that the wine, she like chugs the wine in the episode where they're in the house. Well, I guess they're always in the house. The water house, the potions task. And she like chugs it, and you think, oh, maybe she's like poisoned or something. And she goes, oh God, it's so cheap.
I know. She's so funny. I'm like, she's a vibe. Sometimes I feel her a little bit. I get it. So when Lilia says talking to the dead was a con, but she can do people in time, how do you interpret that?
Yeah, so when Lilia says that, I thought that was so interesting, because that was the first...
Yeah.
You know, we were several episodes in, and I was like, I think that's the first thing that I kind of disagree with. So, good so far, but, the talking to the dead was a con. I feel like, I don't know, that's what mediums do. They connect to folks on the other side. Yeah. I feel like that's not a con, but that's just my personal opinion. But it was interesting how they made the separation of medium and psychic. And the psychic was real, that people in time was a thing, but that dead people was not. And I just didn't understand that, honestly.
I found that interesting too. Yeah, I found that interesting too. But maybe they didn't want to do all that research or something, because I feel like that could take you down a little rabbit hole. How do you explain the difference between a psychic and a medium, and are they the same thing? How would you explain that?
Yeah, it's very similar to what we were kind of saying earlier. You can be a psychic and a medium, but you can also be very separate. Like psychics, it's corrective. Like you can read people, you read time, career, relationships, like the very basic past, present, future, and then that's using your psychic ability, and then you jumping into mediumship, you're using the same ability, you're just setting the intention of, okay, I will allow spirits to communicate with me, dead folks. Right. And if that's not comfortable to you, you can say no. And I knew a girl that was in the program that I was in, and she was like, I love all the psychic stuff, I'm going to do it, but the mediumship scares me, so I'm not going to do that.
The ghost thing is where I draw the line.
No.
Yeah. I relate to that because I feel like I'm super open to my psychic stuff, but I think I get sometimes like unwanted medium stuff, and when I'm not trying, and sometimes it freaks me out really.
Oh yeah.
So I'm like, I don't know if I'm prepared for that or how to approach it, because it's totally different. It's like different things. So
yeah, I mean, you're not just like picking up on somebody's energy and what's coming in, you're like picking up on a real person. And sometimes they're not always good. Not good energy, so it can be scary. Right.
Speaking of, when Agatha sees her mother's ghost, is that how spirits appear to a medium, or how would you explain that?
I think that's why I try not to use the word ghost a lot, is because that's what people think of.
They think of like a whole...
Yeah, like an apparition person in front of me that I can visibly see with my literal eye. And when I see, spirit, I really see it as like, it's in my mind's eye. It's like a superimposed image. It's like overlaid. It's not literally there. And I think that's why a lot of people get hung up on clairvoyance, is they're like, I'm not seeing a ghost in my space.
People walk around.
Yeah.
Right.
And
is it different for every medium how they receive like spirits, like how they see them?
Because some people are very like mental, like I'm kind of describing. Some people will swear that they can see them in their literal environment. Some people are like, no, it's kind of in my mind's eye. I find like that's most people. But then there's also a whole realm of physical mediums and like mediums that can get things to move literally. And I'm very interested in that. I was actually going to take a course on that, but I'm very skeptical. But I'm like, let's try it and let's see. But
I think I have a medium book, like a Raymond Buckland, I think is his name, like medium book, and he like talks about all those different types of mediums, and I'm like, this is so interesting. It's fascinating.
On that. Huh.
Yeah,
because he wrote
like,
the Big Blue Witchcraft
He
book.
did.
Yeah,
and I know he describes like physical mediums and like kind of what you were describing. So
yeah, awesome. Now, Agatha, she wears this pendant, and it looks like the Maiden Mother Crone. I think it's technically the Fates, but let's say it's the Maiden Mother Crone. What is that? What is that?
So, from what I have learned, that her pendant could totally represent Maiden Mother Crone. Basically, it's just a symbol, like a well-known symbol, and it represents the phases of a witch's life. So it would be 3 faces of a woman, and the first phase would be the maiden, which is the young lady, you're younger, like a young woman, and then you go to the mother, which she's often depicted like in the center, and usually she's pregnant, and that would represent, womanhood, usually where a woman becomes a mother. They're in their midlife, and then the end would be crone, which is an older woman. And, they're wiser and they're older. And it's just the phases of a witch's life.
Nice.
It can also be used as like a protection symbol. I know Hecate, I have a Hecate pendant where it's the 3 faces of Hecate. So that could be represented as Maiden Mother Crone as well. And also the triple moon symbol can be interpreted as that as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's one thing I thought I was wondering.
It's a very, it's a very witchy, like, symbol. So
gotcha. And I think you could argue that we see all of that in Agatha throughout the whole series. Right?
We totally do, yeah. And I thought that was great. I know people, like I did a little TikTok dive, and they were like, we really got to see her as a young woman, and then be a mother, and then, old. So
yeah, and it's kind of like her origin story too, like being this mother and how she became to be this evil thing because she lost her son, which was...
I know, and it really broke my heart. Like it's so sad. I wasn't expecting it to be sad at the end, but
I know,
yeah,
because I think we're both moms, right? So it's like we're both moms.
I also really loved because I know like in media, whatever there's like witches, they always have daughters. I also really liked that she had a son.
Yeah.
Because I have sons only, so, but always in the mainstream media, it's always like the witches will have daughters and then they'll carry on and whatever. Yeah, and I was like, oh, it's kind of nice that she had a son, because I feel like I have sons too, so that's kind of sweet. It's kind of sweet.
Yeah, no, I love that.
So, it's different.
My first is a son too, and I think that it touched me in a different way because of that.
Yeah, me too, totally. And it broke my heart for her, so... It made me empathize with her a little bit more.
100%.
Yeah.
And speaking of kids, like, there was one line, I think it was Lilia that said this on the road, and she was talking about, like, all the misconceptions about witches, and she, I can't remember the exact quote, but she talks about, like, eating babies.
Eating babies.
And that's, like, a thing that's associated with witches. Do you know anything about that?
It is. So, upon my research, apparently, it's a phrase that stemmed from very old school, Christianity, where they would basically call atheists and heathens, they would say, because, they think that they didn't have any morals whatsoever. So they would say, what is the worst thing we can say about them? The worst thing we can say is that they eat babies. So that's kind of where it stemmed from. I guess it's just kind of like been a joke for forever. But yeah, they would just say, oh, they eat baby souls, whatever.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Random.
Yeah, I didn't know that. And I was like, where does that come from? Because it's like everywhere all the time. We're going to steal the children. We're going to eat your children.
Yeah.
We're going to take their life force energy.
Yeah, and I'm sure,
Yeah.
I think it's definitely like a trope that you've seen in other movies.
It
I
totally
can't think
is.
of any at the moment, but I
And
know
like
I've heard
Hocus
it before.
Pocus.
Hocus,
Yeah,
oh,
Hocus
duh.
Pocus, they
Yeah,
totally,
duh.
yeah, yeah. They're like the children. Yeah.
Yeah, you're so right.
We actually need the children for our skincare, but it's skincare.
I don't
Yes.
know. If anything, my children have like brought about the opposite.
Yes, exactly.
Oh. And so on that kind of same thought line, I think later Lilia also jokes about having a third nipple. And can you speak at all to that? Like what? It's very like flippant offhand, but I caught it.
I think it's in reference to, because when, like, don't quote me on this, but I believe that when there were witch trials, people would search for, witches' marks on a witch's body. And often it could be like a mole or something like really odd or like a scar or whatever.
Yeah.
And, so it's probably just funny, like, oh yeah, I have a third nipple because I'm a witch.
Yeah.
I think it's in reference to that.
I think you're right. I went
Yeah.
I went to Salem last year, and I took a tour, and they talked about that, how they were just looking for anything weird to just throw somebody under the bus. And if it was a mole, they're like, third nipple.
How dare you?
Yeah.
You're a witch. Totally. Yes.
Yeah. But I don't think that's literal, obviously. I don't think.
Right. No. Yeah.
So I think during Lorna's episode, they talk about, and we kind of know about her background. She's got a mom who is a witch, and they called her a blood witch in one of the episodes, and I was curious what that meant, and if that was like a thing today.
So this. Okay, so you know how some people say they're like born, like into like psychics, like born with gifts.
Yeah.
But you actually know that you can develop them later on. That's kind of like the same realm. So you can totally be born into a witchcraft family who practices witchcraft, and similar, like if you're born into a Catholic family or a Jewish family, that can totally be a thing that you pass on. I don't necessarily believe that there's like a blood, like it has to be a blood thing, like kind of like the psychic thing where people believe you have to be like, it has to be passed down genetically. But yeah, I think totally anybody can, if they wanted to study witchcraft, I think they totally could, even if they weren't born into it.
I think same thing on my end. It's like, and that's my whole story, is like I learned how to do this. But a lot of people believe that though, and I always find that interesting, because I know there's like always a big deal around, like people are like, well, maybe someone in your ancestry was this, or was psychic and now you're psychic. Maybe it's passed down. And like, I don't know how to feel about that. How do you feel about that? I don't, because I'll see it in people's profiles sometimes, and it'll be like 5th generation psychic, and I was like, okay, that doesn't really say anything, in my opinion, because it's a skill. Yeah. And it's something you practice that. So even if your grandma, great-grandma was psychic, like, that doesn't reflect on your abilities in this current moment. But
that's very similar to like the blood witch thing, because it's also a skill. It's also something you have to study and learn and practice. So
how do you approach it, or how do you look at it as a skill and not the opposite, I guess?
Witchcraft?
Yeah, witchcraft, sorry.
So you sort of have to learn, like, say you're wanting to study, the witchy properties of herbs. You would kind of have to, go through different herbs and figure out what their spiritual witchy properties are, and kind of like acquire that knowledge. If you wanted to learn about the moon phases and which days of the week to do specific workings, you would do that as well. It's like things you just kind of have to, learn. And then you don't always go and practice your first spell, and then you're like, the next day it's going to happen, because it requires a lot of energy and a lot of focus. And sometimes that can be hard to do on the first time. So you kind of have to keep trying. And I know I follow a witch who literally, like, she logs her results of her her
Yeah.
practice to see if it's actually working. And I'm like, that's a very smart and logical way to approach it. So I appreciate that she does that. But yeah, you're not just going to be like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to practice my first spell, and then you can't always expect it to like work the next day, you know. But just kind of like with anything, just like if you're practicing tarot cards, you kind of have to practice reading on people and get their feedback, and you kind of have to do that within like witchcraft too.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So,
I think you brought up a good point too of like this writing this down. This is called like a grimoire or like a book of spells, correct? And we see that in Agatha too.
Yeah. So you see that actually a lot in Agatha, and then in a lot of witchy movies. But that's totally the thing. Like you can just write down any kind of witchy information you want to keep and reference back to. And I know modern witches, they don't always use a book. Some of them they use like notes on the computer or like you know, which is so funny to me because it's always like this big giant book. But you can do it. You can do it modern too, like some notes or whatever. So. Yeah,
because Agatha, I don't know if we ever got the full storyline of that, of like she sold her soul for the book.
Yeah, I really wish they would have, gone more like, it would be nice to have seen more of her like development as, into Agatha would have been cool.
Yeah, I wonder if we're going to see it next, because I feel like it was left on like there's more coming.
Yeah, I also wanted to see how like her relationship with Rio, like kind of more of the backstory on that. I would have liked to see more on that too.
I think that you and everyone else.
yeah, because it was so good, and I want to know more. How did they fall in love?
Well, hopefully they'll go back into it. Like I know they're doing Vision next, like a Vision series.
Okay. Oh, interesting.
And I think Wiccan, Billy, Teen is supposed to also be part of maybe the Marvel, good. Like kid Marvel version. I don't know. Don't quote me on that.
I could see them like putting him like I could see that.
Because I don't know. That's where I get it more into the like Marvel, and like I would go, and I was in film school. I would religiously go to every single movie as it came out, because being in film school, it's a very bro environment. All the boys were super into it, and so I was like the only girl in the group, and I was like, let's do it. And I did legitimately enjoy those movies, and we studied them because we had to. But I think really cool. I have a little bit of the knowledge in the background of like I think there's more coming, but
okay, so this one is an interesting one because I really liked this episode too, where where she's experiencing life out of sequence, and we sort of see like her see flashes and then like gaps between time. And do you think that there are some psychics who experience life that way?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously can't speak for every psychic. I think it was fantastic in that it was very similar to how I pick up information sometimes. It's not necessarily how I live like my day-to-day life, but when I'm sitting down and trying to get a reading to come through, like I will get like a piece over here, a piece over there, and it'll be out of order. And I always like say, I'm getting like the puzzle pieces here and I'm having a hard time fitting it together. Like that's usually what I say. But it absolutely happens where like I'm getting things and I don't know how to connect the dots. And it's really about how do I ask the right questions? How do I pull tools from my toolkit to really pull this all together so I'm not just giving fragmented, confusing little bits,
Yeah, I feel like spirit messages are always so cryptic. And it's like a giant like riddle.
It can be sometimes, 100%.
Yeah. But I really liked that episode too. It was really good.
I liked it.
I thought it was amazing. I think they did a good job with that one.
Yeah. I was about to get on my high horse about like her randomly shouting prophecies, and I was like, okay, we don't do that. I'm not just walking around like 3 of Pentacles. Like, no, that's not. But now that I understand it was part of the larger story, I was like, oh, okay, there was reason behind that. We weren't just being awful towards psychics.
Yeah, because at first you're like, she's kind of nutty.
Yeah.
And I promise I'm not like that. So when they put the final piece together, it makes sense. Totally makes sense. Yeah.
But I mean, I also...
Lauren's like, how dare you? I don't go around saying the tower. To everybody.
Exactly. I mean, but I do appreciate that they took her from nutty to understandable, relatable, you know, and that's why
that was really good.
Thank you.
Yeah, they did a good job with that. Yeah, because at first you're like, oh god, she's so weird. She's nutty. Although I do feel like people could perceive, you know, maybe psychics or like, you know, spiritual people as a little nutty or weird, maybe.
Yep, absolutely.
They're just misunderstood. So when Jen tells Lilia in reference to her abilities, she says, you said it happened when you were younger. Why did it stop? And then her response was that she sort of blocked it out. Does that happen to psychics? Can they block out their abilities?
Yeah, because I think she was talking about like her being a kid, and she was saying like she had more abilities as a kid, and then she kind of shut it off. And I feel like that's the majority of people. I feel like that's almost everyone. Totally. We're all born a little more intuitive, and then the world kind of teaches us to ignore it, don't believe it, it's fake, it's not real. And so a lot of people, when they come to developing their psychic abilities, it's a lot about learning how to unlearn a lot of that like preconditioned stuff that we're told.
Yeah.
And that makes total sense. Turn it back on. So
I always think it's interesting because, you know, like you said, children are, when you're younger, you're more open. And then I think the same can be said when you're older as well, because I feel like we're so close to the line of like earth and then, you know, the other side.
Yeah.
So I'm like, maybe that has to do with it because we're so close to that thin separation there.
Yeah.
That's just my random thoughts. You know?
No, I feel you. And I think, you know, I have a question for you around that. Like, do you feel like your witchcraft opened you up more to your own intuitive abilities?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I would say that I've always kind of been, I guess you would say like clairvoyant, because I've always had very vivid dreams, and but you know, I would kind of wake up in the morning and like put them to the side. And then once I started practicing and being more open and reading more about like how to open your third eye, how to, you know, envision certain things, manifesting stuff like that, I think that totally made me a little more open to witchy things and other, you know, kind of spiritual stuff. So there's totally been like spiritual, like, I guess psychic stuff that's happened to me. Totally. That didn't happen to me before I started practicing. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's a lot of people's experience, and so
yeah,
I love that they threw that in there, because it shows that it's very much like something that you can control. So
yeah. Sometimes when, like at night, sometimes I can't sleep, you know, and I'm always like, spirits, please leave me alone. I'm trying to sleep. Like, please, I'm so
not
tired.
Right now.
Like, you don't understand. I have to go to school in the morning, okay?
Yeah.
Please. I beg.
I think that's a lot. That's so many people's experiences. I get that all the time. I'm getting it, but just like when I'm right about ready to fall asleep, and it's like, oh, that's inconvenient.
Yeah. And I think it's just because like everything is like turned off, and then you're more like, you know, in like a meditative, like calm state, maybe.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you think that people could get possessed by ghosts, sort of like how Agatha got possessed? What was it, by her mom? Was it her mom?
I think that was her mom. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's more media. That's where I lean more towards Hollywood, because I don't feel like that really happens.
Right.
I've again never seen it, but at the same time, I've done this for almost 10 years now, and I've had a lot of ghost spirits come through, and I've never allowed them to like ever go there, and I don't think that they can, literally. I don't, not like in that way of where like they can't possess our body in that way and like control us like a robot, like, no. Right,
there's not just like ghosts jumping in and like, you know, taking your
you'd
body.
You'd see it a lot more if it were the case, I think.
Yeah. You read tarot as well, right?
Correct, yeah.
Like you do tarot and oracle and all that, so when Agatha said tarot is not a skill, but Billy said, yes, it is. It's intuition and interpretation. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I love that, because at first when Agatha yelled that, like, she's like, tarot's not a skill. I was like, wait. But then they let teen kind of explain that, and I was like, that's exactly what
Right.
it is. I think my husband was sitting next to me, and I was like, yep, 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 what he said, and my husband's just so sick and tired of me. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's exactly that. It's a skill of learning how to do it. Like, you have to understand
Right.
the card meanings, but then there is room for your intuition and interpretation. Everyone has a
Totally.
different opinion of like what one card might be. You know, like
Totally.
what's the moon card to you, for example?
Right. The moon card to me, like when I think of the moon, like this is just like my intuition.
Uh-huh.
I think of, spirituality, connecting, something being illuminated in the dark,
Yeah.
moonlight, something bring, shine upon the moonlight that might have not been there before. So yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think somebody else might say, "Oh, it's your subconscious. It's a
Right.
mask that you wear," and
Right.
and then somebody over here might have another interpretation, and so
Yeah.
it's kind of
I
a
think
little
that's
bit
what's,
your gut
yeah,
feeling.
totally. I agree. I think that's what's so beautiful about tarot because it's just art, and then it's up to you to interpret the
Yeah,
whole picture of. So it's beautiful. Yeah,
yeah,
it's totally skill.
yeah,
Because I know not everybody can comfortably read tarot, as a master skill or whatever. So
yeah. Well, and I didn't know how to read it until I took classes on it because
yeah,
it's a lot. It's not like oracle
it
cards.
is.
You
It
gotta
is.
you do. There is some learning there.
Yes, it takes a while for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think they had, I know I did some research. They had one person on their writing staff that was like a huge tarot person. And so I
Oh
think that's
yeah.
why we got such a good representation of the tarot in this
Yes,
series.
because I know she said Billy was the magician,
Magician,
and I
yeah.
was like, okay. And then like at the end, you're like, oh my goodness, he
Yeah,
is the
he
magician.
is.
So yeah, they did really good with that.
Yeah,
I
I loved
agree.
it.
Like at least they did the research.
Yeah. Because the magician is literally like, on the magician card there's like one hand pointing up, one hand pointing down, and it's like whatever
hmm
you think, believe, are inspired by, you will actualize like into this plane,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah.
literally what he does with his abilities.
Yes, yeah, totally. He's totally a magician. That's like totally like
Yeah,
such a good spot on definition for that.
yeah. You know, one theme that was there from the beginning to the end was the sigil that was placed
hmm
on Billy. And that sigil kind of covered up his mouth. He wasn't able to speak who he was. I have a much different understanding of what sigils are, but maybe there's
hmm
some crossover there. Curious what a sigil is for witches.
Yeah, so a sigil for witches is basically it's like a seal and the or a symbol, and that seal or a symbol carries a specific intention and a specific energy, and it is something that's personally crafted by the practitioner through their whatever intention they want. So it could be like, um, you know, I will have money today, or something as simple as that. And then you sort of put your energy into it. You charge it. You create the symbol yourself, and you can use the sigil on. Some people like to put the sigil on their skin. Some people like to put the sigil on a piece of paper and burn it, or on a bay leaf, or on a candle. It's kind of really personal, but it's basically just like a seal, a magical seal that you create that holds a specific intention for you.
Okay, awesome.
And it can be anything, you know. But me personally, I don't use a lot of sigils myself. It's funny because modern witchcraft, you can totally go online and there's a sigil maker. So you can type. It's so funny because there's a
Yeah,
sigil maker. You can go on and type your intention, and then boom, it'll generate a sigil for you. And then
that
you can
seems
just use that
backwards.
sigil. Yes, but that's modern witchcraft, which is like hilarious. That's just like witchcraft in
Yeah.
2024. So this is funny.
Huh.
Um,
Okay.
I use I use so right now I'm really into I've been practicing more like ceremonial magic, like Jupiter magic, and
Okay.
each planet has their own seal,
Okay.
their own sigil, and I use a Jupiter sigil a lot
Okay.
for my working stuff. Yeah.
Is that like part of like your logo too?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah,
Okay.
I guess that would kind of be like my own seal. So my husband and I made it together. And I was like, oh, maybe we'll make like a symbol that represents me. And it's just like an M, a W. So like it just represents, the metaphysical witch. And then there's like an S.
Okay.
So he like, but he made it for me.
That's
And I was
cute.
like, I really like this. I'm gonna use it. So yeah,
I love
yeah,
that. I just, yeah, I thought that, I was like, wait, that's what that looks like. And so I was
yeah.
curious.
It totally does. Yeah, this represents my business, the Metaphysical Witch, and then it has my first initial,
I
my
see.
name. So
Okay.
yeah.
Well, and speaking about like more modern witchcraft, I think one of my favorite lines is um, they talk about analog magic.
Oh yeah.
Teen does, and he says, analog magic is labor intensive, manual
Mm-hmm.
acts of magic, emphasis on the craft. Curious on
Yes.
like what that is in that realm.
So in that realm, I feel like the analog magic would be more like real life witchcraft, like in our realm.
Okay.
And kind of like I think it's just a way to differentiate between like their like superpowers, where they're like blasting with their light and stuff,
Yeah.
and then actual like craft, like making a sigil or making a potion, something that requires more like energy, like you have to craft,
Okay.
craft it. So I think it's just like they're just making the difference between that and then superhero Marvel magic.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah.
And it seems like too it represents like the mundane or just like
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
tedious kind of maybe boring work is kind of what I would
Yes.
interpret it as. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And in that realm, I imagine like if you have to craft a potion, that would be extremely boring. Because you're just like, why can't I just like zap this thing and it's done?
Yeah.
But if you have to like put, in that realm, you're like, okay, I need to, like, there's one where they need like herbs and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that would be like the tedious analog
Yeah.
magic.
Because I think
Mm-hmm.
he grabbed the sous vide like because they're like, okay, well, how do we heat this up quickly? They don't
Yeah,
have
yeah.
literal magic, so let's
Right.
use a sous vide.
Yeah, that's so funny because they're just like, dang it, now we actually have to
Yeah.
let's go magic. Yeah, funny.
Well, kind of like wrapping this up, I'm curious if there's any other thing in this series that you just were super super happy about, or maybe not so happy, when it came to like representing you and what you do and the world of everybody in it, witches specifically.
I think overall, most of us witches, we just really love to consume anything that sort of has, a representation of us, especially when it's a little more accurate than like, say something that's completely unhinged, like we're kidnapping kids and eating them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I think it's always fun for us to watch, and then it's just entertaining. Sometimes you're like, okay, well, that's not exactly right, but it's still fun and it's interesting to watch, and I always find it fascinating when like people who are outside of the witchcraft community enjoy it as well. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that's so nice. It's like kind of more like exposure or representation, I guess. So I just like that. I think we all kind of like that a little bit.
Yeah, it's kind of like for those who are maybe who've never seen anything of that, they can get their feet wet and just learn a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think, in one of the last episodes, when it was the Lilia's episode where they were all doing the tarot, they all dressed up as different witches from various media over time. I think we had like the Wicked Witch of the West. I think Jen was like the
What's Jen?
Snow White witch,
Oh,
and then what were the other ones?
Lilio?
Glinda the Good Witch.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
I
I'm
can't
just
remember
blanking
the
on the
others
other ones. But essentially, they're all dressed as different ones. And Agatha is kind of the Wicked Witch. And the Wicked Witch is like from The Wizard of Oz. We've seen that she's a symbol of evil. She's got a green face. That's what people associate with witches. That's Halloween witches. And, by the end of this series, we learn that she's misunderstood. That, this is not a Wicked Witch. And, I think that we find out her motivations again, her son.
Yeah.
And, overall, I think that they did a good job communicating that, witches are misunderstood.
They totally are.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed the, like, how complex Agatha's character was because, on the surface, she's just this, like, bitchy kind of, like, crazy witch, right?
Yeah.
And, but she has depth to her as they reveal her story, especially with her son and with Rio. And so I liked how they did that with her because I really kind of enjoyed her a lot. So
I did
she
too.
was one of my favorites, and I kind of empathize with her a little bit. And I'm like, okay, well, now I can see you can kind of see how she got there. But
Yeah,
I think they did a good job explaining that. So
I agree.
yeah, for
Like,
sure.
I truly didn't have much to complain about, and that's
Yeah,
coming from
it was so good.
my Virgo rising. I'm here to
Yeah,
analyze. I'm here to pick it apart. And
yeah,
there's like not I don't have very much to complain about here, and so I think I love the series. I hope
hmm
other people really enjoy watching it as well.
yeah. I agree. It was so good. I really liked it. And then at the end, it really like touched my
I
heart.
know.
And I was like, oh, how dare you? You're gonna make me cry.
Yeah.
So good. And then yeah, they all of the actresses did such a good job, I think, with their characters. It was
Oh
amazing.
yeah.
So
No kidding. I think that
yeah.
one of my favorite things that Catherine Hahn did as an actress was like she did her fingers very like
Oh,
witchy.
she does such a good job with that.
Yeah.
And she's always like,
Yeah.
and I love that. I'm
The
like
cape
so sassy,
flips.
so witchy, and she always does like her coat thing. I'm like, I love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Oh, I know.
So good. She does such
I
a
will
good job.
admit that I like Googled cosplay outfits for Agatha, but I
Oh,
couldn't
I
find
love
any
that.
yet. But I was like, maybe
You just
next
need like
year.
you just need like a little brooch and then like a long jacket or something.
I'm
Yeah.
sure you could thrift it
Yeah,
pretty easy.
totally. So good.
Awesome.
It's good.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for joining me.
Yeah.
Also, thank you everyone for listening. I hope that you
Mhm.
enjoyed this show, but also just learned maybe something from this podcast. Maybe noticed a few tidbits that you might have missed. Maybe go back and rewatch
Mhm.
it, look for those. Before we jump off, I just want to have Sarah remind you where you can find her.
Yeah, so you can find me on TikTok. My at is Metaphysical Witch. It's without the because apparently there was already another Metaphysical Witch. But yeah, so that's TikTok. Instagram is the Metaphysical Witch, and YouTube is the Metaphysical Witch as well.
Awesome. And I'm Psychic Lauryn. You can find me on YouTube. I mean, if you're at this podcast, you should know where to find the rest of my junk. But other than that, let us know what you thought about this episode. Subscribe, follow. Make sure you go over and follow Sarah at the Metaphysical Witch. And yeah, thank you all so much for joining us, for listening, and we will see you next time. Alrighty, bye.